Discernment ministries, or heresy hunters as some people like to call them, are rampant on YouTube at the moment. And in this video, I'd like to talk about why I'm somewhat hesitant to name certain ministries or preachers or pastors as wolves or false teachers. Although ironically, in this video, as I go through what I would like to refer to as 4 buckets that I place different ministries in, I'm going to end up inevitably naming false teachers as I get to the last bucket. But there is a reason why I'm hesitant to do that at the moment. And hopefully, as I work through this process of the 4 buckets, it will help you in your journey as you're listening to different ministries online or going to a particular church to work out, where does this fit in my bucket if you hold these 4 buckets as well. So before I do that though, I just want to invite you to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It really does help the channel grow. I've got some great content coming up in the near future. Videos like this, videos on revivals, videos responding to some of those discernment ministries regarding the charismatic gifts. So I think those would be great videos for you to watch, engage with, and it'll just be a great encouragement to me if you subscribe. So plug for the channel over. So before I go into these 4 buckets, I just want to say, firstly, anybody I name in this video, I disagree with them somewhere about something. It's just inevitable. In fact, anytime, even if I highly recommend an author or a preacher or a speaker, if I have them on the YouTube channel, there's going to be areas of disagreement. That should be a given when we discuss these things. But the first of the 4 buckets I'd like to mention are generally those that I look at their ministries, listen to their teaching, how they come across in terms of their life and their character. And again, the key emphasis there is how they come across, because some of these ministries I'm going to mention, I've only seen from a distance, and any I've seen up front and personal, you would never have heard of probably. And so it'd be very difficult for you to relate in the context of this video. But in that first bucket, these are guys that I would say theologically, we share a whole lot of things in common, things that are important to me. We share those in common. The ministry style, the attitude, the tone, are things that I think, yeah, we relate there, we connect there. I like the books that you write or the sermons that you preach or the content that you produce. And I feel like we could be ministry fellows, that if I was in your church, I would happily be in your church serving alongside you in any capacity that could help that ministry, as far as I can tell from a distance. And the distance is key to a lot of those. And so these are some that I've observed that I'd put in that bucket. The Remnant Radio guys for me would fit in that bucket. They're Word and Spirit guys. They are, some of them are Calvinists, some of them are not, but it doesn't seem to be a major thing. They all seem to be complementarian, and they really want to pursue the Word thoroughly and have the Word guide us in how we operate in spiritual gifts, but also be open to the supernatural. So those are guys that fit in that bucket for me. Another guy would be Skip Heitzeg. I listen to Skip a lot, really been blessed by his ministry. I think he's got a wonderful church. And again, all these are as far as I can tell. The danger is in making a video like this is if in 6 months' time a scandal comes out, you feel really bad and awkward. But this is the life we live at the moment in this YouTube world, and world where we can access ministries from any part of the globe and enjoy them. Gavin Ortland's another one. Although he's a Calvinist and he's Reformed, he's almost a different kind of Calvinist to some of the other guys that we'd mentioned. And then Sam Storms is another guy. And all these guys, I could tell you that there are specific things I disagree with them, things that they've said that I disagree with, even ways that they've come across at certain times on certain issues that I disagree with. But that's okay. These are small things, and it's a recognition that we're always, as human beings, going to disagree on various things, but still recognize those major common ground of these guys believe not only in the fundamentals, but there's some secondary issues that we share, and some, I would guess, tone or attitude towards ministry that we have in common. In the second bucket, and this is probably the widest bucket that I would have, these are guys that I would listen to from time to time, dip into. Maybe I've read their books. Maybe in some cases, it's a ministry of preacher where I've heard them on a particular topic and not much else. But based on that one topic, I've really been blessed and encouraged by it. So for one example of those is a guy called Daniel Cullender. Now, I've heard people call Daniel as NAR. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't know. What I've listened to is he did a series on cessationism and the gifts of the Spirit, responding to various arguments for cessationism. And I enjoyed that series. I thought it was good. As I don't know a ton about him now, I did actually go to Bible school with Daniel, so I knew 19, 20-year-old Daniel Cullender, not what he's probably like 40-something-year-old Daniel Cullender now. I've not been with him in person for over 20 years. So when I say that based on that one series, I enjoyed it. I'll tell you who else I'm going to surprise you I put in this bucket. So these are guys in bucket 2 that, as far as I can tell, they believe the majors, they saved, they want to be faithful to the scriptures, however they interpret them, and that's Justin Peters. Now, do I have disagreements with Justin Peters in terms of his tone of his ministry? 100% yes. Do I think he makes a lot of really unhelpful sweeping statements? Absolutely 100%. Do I vigorously disagree with his stance on the gifts of the Spirit and his view as a cessationist? And can we hear from God today? 100%. Again, yes. But saying that, as far as I can tell, whilst he kind of leans into these things about his ministry that I don't really like, I don't enjoy, I think he's trying to be faithful to the word of God. He's trying to be faithful to what he believes. He thinks he's doing a good job. He majors on Jesus Christ. He majors on the gospel. And so from that point of view, I would say I put him in bucket 2. He's a brother. John MacArthur would be in there. Tim Keller would be in there. John Piper would be in there for me. Mike Winger's another guy that would be in there. So they're not quite in that first tier, but these are guys that I think some I listen to more than others. I would listen to a lot more Mike Winger than I would Justin Peters. I'd listen to a lot more John MacArthur than I would Justin Peters, if I'm honest. And I'd listen to a lot more John Piper than I would Daniel Cullender. Saying that, these are guys, as far as I can tell, they believe thoroughly in the fundamentals of the faith. There doesn't seem to be any major flags in regards to their character, as far as I can tell. Again, I don't know everything, and this is part of the conversation, isn't it? That we don't know everything about people that we listen to or we read. But there's certain aspects at times of their ministries, including Justin Peters, where I've watched 1 or 2 of his videos and I've gone away and thought, that was helpful. Thank you for that, Justin. And I've agreed with some things he said. So that would be my take in the second bucket. And it's a really wide bucket. And some people are in there, quite honestly, out of ignorance. That's okay. I think it's a big old world. And we'll go to some of the reasons why I'm hesitant at the end after we've gone through the fourth bucket. The third bucket are, I have cautions. They're not for me, but I wouldn't label them a false teacher or a wolf because I don't know. I don't have the evidence. And so when we talk about these guys, I would say these guys I have flags from. I remember years ago watching some Mark Driscoll snippets when he was at Mars Hill. Some people were saying, Mars Hill's an amazing church. Mark Driscoll's amazing. He's Acts 29. You need to listen to him. And I pulled up some clips on YouTube, came across the famous, "How dare you" one, the WWE guy. Watched a few other things as well. And I'll be honest with you, my first thought was, this guy comes across as a bit of a bully. I don't think I'd like to be in his church. He's not for me. So I had those flags within myself and I just kind of put it to the side. I wouldn't have said he's a false teacher or a wolf. Didn't have any evidence towards that, but I just said, not for me. And so I put him in that bucket. I would say Mike Bickle was in that bucket for me up until recently. When the scandals came out, he's moved into bucket 4. So he was there. I would say Dr. Michael Brown was probably in bucket 2. Now he's moved to bucket 3 after things. People move according to information. Another guy that would be in this bucket for me, number 3, would be John Bevere. Now, John Bevere is a very popular author and teacher, but I'll be honest with you, off the basis of Undercover and a few other things that I've heard him say here and there, I've got some flags, got some cautions. I don't know enough about him to say that he's a wolf or he's a false teacher. He might be a guy that sincerely believes the interpretations and conclusions that he comes to on the scriptures, which I don't think are helpful in some cases, especially in the case of the book Undercover, which I hope to do a video on in the near future. I'm going to reread the book, make some notes on it, and talk about how that book is probably one of the issues that we're seeing in the charismatic church today, and some of the teachings in that book that have led to some of the abuses, scandals, and cover-ups. I do think that is a key thing to talk about, because even if that book hasn't influenced people directly, the teaching in it has. So he would be there. Another guy that might surprise people that I have in bucket number 3 is Todd White. So Todd White was blowing up, I think, a number of years ago. And I remember thinking, I probably should sit down and listen to some messages. There was a guy I was discipling that was talking about Todd White. And I sat down and listened to about 3 or 4 messages. And what I discovered was the flag for me was he spoke a lot about himself and not much about Jesus. Also in the messages I heard, he used the word gospel a lot, but never really articulated what the gospel was. And that was enough for me to say, okay, he's not for me. He seems really enthusiastic. If I take him at his word, he seems to really love people, really love Jesus, but yet he seems to talk about himself a lot. And that could be a maturity thing. It could be bigger issues I didn't know. And I know Mike Winger has recently put out a video about Todd White. The reason why I don't go with Mike Winger on this yet is because it was an anonymous open letter. Some of the things were vague and not specific. Personally, I didn't feel comfortable with an anonymous open letter. Just didn't see how that was helpful at all. That's my personal take on it. Obviously, Mike Winger can do what he wants, and then the rest of us can agree or not agree, watch the videos or not watch the videos. The evidence wasn't presented. Now, I know the intention for Mike Winger is to present the evidence, and if the evidence appears compelling, and I also tried to watch some rebuttal or response videos to those, as I did come across somebody responding to Mike Winger regarding Benny Hinn, and they weigh up the evidence from there. Benny Hinn, by the way, is in the fourth bucket, which we'll get to. So Todd White, at the moment, he's there. It might move if I find the evidence compelling. It might not move if I never get round to watching the evidence. Either way, he's not for me, and that's where I would land, and I would say to people, yeah, I got some flags. He's not for me, but I wouldn't feel compelled to say he's a false teacher. The final one is the false teacher bucket. And of course, as I mentioned, Benny Hinn, I found the evidence compelling to place him there. Kenneth Copeland is another one for me that falls into this bucket. I feel like there's just enough there from his life and from the teachings that I've seen to say this is a guy that the Apostle Paul warns you about, and I think Peter as well. Again, I say that, and I know people who will say, but he's incredibly generous, really supported some ministries with his money, and I'm sure he has. Do you know, I've met people in my personal life who have been generous, but have had incredibly dodgy motives to control or manipulate, and those motives have come out later on in the line. So generosity isn't always an indication, unfortunately, of whether or not somebody is a wolf or not a wolf. But I feel like for me, he's there. You might disagree, and that's okay. This is the whole point of the process. You might have him in the bucket 3 or a bucket 2, but you should have reasons why they're there. And then another one was, I've seen some stuff on Catherine Crick recently, and it was always the flags there, definitely. But then I watched Remnant Radio's, guess not portrayal, but just really they took a look at her ministry, and there was enough there to say she is dangerous, and that evidence was compelling. I trust those guys. Obviously they're in bucket 1, but also I felt like the clips were long enough and sustained enough to show, gosh, I would encourage somebody to stay away from that. That seems dangerous to me. So those are a few. Those are the buckets. And so reasons I'm hesitant to really go and place people in those buckets is, number one, sometimes it's the source of the evidence. And when I say the source of the evidence, sometimes somebody's presenting to you, hey, this person's a false teacher, and they have a particular bias or they have a particular worldview. So, for example, if you've got an extreme cessationist where their worldview is God never speaks to us outside of scripture. So dreams, visions, prophecies, whispers, words of knowledge, pulsion of the heart, whatever it is, they would look at that. So anything that person says that would indicate that God spoke to them, they're immediately skeptical. They immediately dismiss it. And so that to them is already evidence that they're in the false teacher bucket or they're a wolf. And so they're adding that to the pile. And one of the sources of evidence on some guys was Justin Peters does his Clouds Without Rain or something like that seminar, but he did it at the latest G3 cessationist conference, and I do intend to make a video responding to that because I don't think anybody specifically has responded to him on the roots of the Pentecostal charismatic movement, but I'd like to do so. But when he talked about Parnham and Seymour, I know a guy who's written books on both, who I'm going to be interviewing on this channel. And so I emailed him and just said, can you watch this clip? Can you tell me if these things are true? And he responded to me, said, well, these are mostly true about Parnham. And then he said with Seymour, and he gave some clarifications regarding Seymour and how they were were taken out of context. And one of the evidence about why Willie Seymour was a bad person in Justin Peters' seminar was, as he would walk past, people would give him money and put it in the pockets. And of course, this is because they didn't take up official offerings. But that was used as evidence against him that he was a fraud. It was used from a very biased thing, because there was two ways of interpreting that, or three even, to be honest with you. It could be the way they take up offerings. It could be that he's coerced and manipulated people into giving him money. It could be that people out of their own generosity felt compelled by the Spirit to give him money to support him as the minister over the Azusa Street mission. And so, again, the sources of evidence are always going to look at the fact that people put money in his pocket and then interpret it according to either their own worldview, or they're going to dig a little deeper and try and have support to the end of the conclusion. And I feel sometimes when people are brought to me as wolves or false teachers by certain sources, they've already arrived at the conclusion, and then they've looked at their ministry to find the evidence to support that conclusion, rather than ask, are they genuinely false teachers or wolves? So I think that's one of the sources of the evidence, the strength of the evidence. Sometimes the evidence isn't there and is not revealed until later on. So Mike Bickle is a classic example where there may have been flags around him for a number of people for many a year. So there are certainly folks that would have said, yeah, we just believe because of the Kansas City prophets and other stuff. False teacher, dismissed him straight away. But the reality is, where it was revealed that he is a wolf was in this conduct that's come out over the last couple of years, that's happened over the course of decades. But that wasn't truly revealed until recently, and now we have the strength of the evidence to make that assumption. I think another hesitancy for me, as well as the source of the evidence, the strength of the evidence, and again, going back to the source of the evidence, I would say perhaps a fault there is if there's people I trust has presented the evidence, I can be too willing to take it as well. So that's a danger for all of us, isn't it? We want to believe the best about people. So if they make a claim and it lines up with your theology and everything else, then you want to believe that. You want to choose to believe the best rather than assume the worst. So for example, when Benny Hinn comes out and does his repentance videos, then most of us, we want to really believe, okay, he's repented. He's repented of the prosperity gospel. He's repented of whatever else he repented of in those videos. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we want to believe him. I think there's something in us as Christians that say, yeah, we want to believe the best for this guy, that this guy is genuinely wanting to follow the Lord and honor the Lord in the way that he conducts himself. And unfortunately, in his case, found to be wanting and found to be not true repentance. And that's a sad thing, mainly for him, but also for many of those that follow his ministry. But there is that side of us. And so there's a caution over, I just want to believe the best about somebody. When they say they're not NAR, for example, and they don't believe some of those teachings, or they believe all the orthodox stuff, but maybe have some wild views over there, you want to believe the best. They really truly believe and hold to the orthodox stuff. And then sometimes you have people that dig a lot deeper into the ministry and say, yeah, they've said that, but let's listen to all their teachings on the Trinity or on Jesus Christ or on death and burial and resurrection, whatever it is. You listen to that and then you find out, okay, right. So they affirm it to say they believe it, but it looks like not only do they not understand it, but they're teaching something very contrary to it. Again, it comes back to when you hear those things, we want to believe the best without digging deeper sometimes. Distance is another one. A lot of these guys we talk about, they are high profile figures, many of whom I have never met. And even the one on this list that I've mentioned that I have met, I think, is Dr. Michael Brown, Daniel Cullender. I've met those two that have been named here on this video. Dr. Brown met twice very briefly. He wouldn't remember it. It's probably like 10 seconds both times that I met him. Daniel Cullender, obviously, he was in school with me for, I think, about a year. He did get me involved in Saturday night evangelism, actually, and that was a lot of fun. So I got to know him, but again, we weren't close. He was a year or two ahead of me in the school and things. We were on worship team together, actually, so we spent time doing that. And again, that was a lot of fun, but I wouldn't know him now. There's distance there. There's distance of time, distance of things. And then these other guys, there's just clear distance of, I don't know them, never spent time with them. And in some cases, I've never met anybody that spent time with them. In some cases, I know some people that know these guys or have spent time with them. The next time is time to investigate people. And that's another thing that we don't have. Of course, time also can reveal things. And this is something from 2 Corinthians chapter 11. It says here, "For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds." And so eventually people's deeds will come out, will be made known. But sometimes people will look holy and righteous and talk about holiness and righteousness like Mike Bickle, and we'll think, yeah, they talk about it, they must be living the life, they must be practicing what they preach, again because we think the best, and then only time reveals what the situation is. So that's one of the reasons I'm hesitant, is that time brings forth the evidence, but also time to investigate the evidence. I'm a local church pastor. Unless you are an actual discernment heresy hunting ministry and you get paid from YouTube for doing that, which is really odd, by the way, that's kind of a flag to me that you make money by finding faults in other ministries. And I know some people argue it's doing a service to the body of Christ and exposing false teachers. And I get that part, but there's also an incentive, an unspoken incentive for those guys then to need to find issues with people to make the videos to sustain the income. And I'm not saying that's true of everybody, but the temptation is there. We've got to be aware of that when we're listening to these videos. And sometimes the other thing that makes me hesitant, all of us are wrestling in areas of character, some great, some small. All of us have hurts and past traumas that affect our lives and responses to certain things. All of us are walking a journey towards sanctification. And so when we see these ministries and ministers, and some that I've even mentioned in bucket 1, I've listened to them at times and think, man, you've brought up that thing then, that still hurts you. That still is in your heart as an issue. And of course, does that mean they're not a reliable source of teaching or preaching? Does that mean they're false teachers or they have issues that would move them down from bucket 1? Not necessarily. It just means them, like me, like all of us, have issues that God is perfecting in us. He's working in us. And sometimes when you're very visible in a ministry, we'll spot those things, because some of us would have had experience in those areas, either in ourselves or people close to us. And so we can see them in others, other things we don't see because we've not had experience in those areas, and so we miss them. And so when we can spot the character weaknesses or issues that people may be dealing with or wrestling with that could potentially affect their ministry, if not dealt with by the Lord or submitted to the Lord and allowing the Lord to work there, could cause people issues, but we don't know. And so sometimes I've got the question is this person just got some issues like we all do? It's just human, or are they genuinely nefarious? Are these guys being deceitful intentionally, and they're fleecing the flock and everything else, and their ministry is kind of their means of gain? Or are they somebody with a weakness, and we've just seen a bit of that weakness? And so that's something that gives me pause for thought on people. And then finally, the last caution is, it's just a really serious and heavy thing to say publicly about somebody I've never met. They are a false teacher or a wolf. And so this is where, personally, I think dealing with a teaching is easier than dealing necessarily with an understanding of somebody's character. Again, unless you get all the relevant evidence that we've discussed. And this is why when I do a video on John Bevere's Undercover, I'll be dealing with the teaching of the book, not necessarily John Bevere himself. And I don't plan on doing a deep dive in exploring and listening to hours of John Bevere's ministry or reading lots of his books to find out if he is a wolf or a false teacher. I want to deal with that particular book and then move on. I don't have the time. I have a family, I have a church, and that's the situation in. So these are some of the reasons I'm hesitant to call out wolves and false teachers. You feel free to agree, disagree in the comment. Hopefully the 4 buckets scenario helps you. Maybe you have a different strategy for working through how you rightly discern and partake in ministries. And leave a comment about that. Maybe that'll help somebody in their journey as well. Anyway, hopefully this video has been helpful. If it has, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. God bless you. Bye now.